everybody, it's Sierra, the Artsy Badger, and today we're just doing an old-fashioned sketchbook session, not drawing anything in particular for any sort of challenge or event. And what do I like to draw when I'm just drawing for fun? Well, it may come as no surprise to most of you, but I like to draw skulls. Today's skull is a German Shepherd skull. I decided to do that because I have been very inspired by my dog lately, and she's pretty much all I ever think about ever, so when I was trying to decide what kind of skull to draw, that's just what I went with, and it's what made the most sense to me at the time. To be honest, I'm not even sure this is actually a German Shepherd skull. I kept looking for photos, and there's so many different ones, and I think most of them are actually wolves, but that's besides the point. As you can probably tell, I have cut out a lot of the sketching process, mostly because it took me a lot of trial and error to get it to a point that I deemed acceptable. It was hard because when you think of a German Shepherd skull, you imagine it being really long and very wolf-like, which it is, but it's also a domesticated animal, so it actually looks a little deformed in a weird way, even though German Shepherds are far from the worst case. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to the Cal Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, but there's an exhibit there about dog skulls, and it is horrifying seeing skulls such as for the pug or the chihuahua, animals that we have really sort of bred to be a certain shape and size. It's horrifying. It's so far removed from their ancestors. German Shepherds are not nearly as bad, but from doing this study, I have definitely become slightly more aware of their sort of facial deformities. Now, I guess I should talk a little bit about the art, not just why I decided to do the art. I'm using gouache to sculpt this skull. The reason I say sculpt is because that is really how it feels to me when I use gouache, because you can go on top of what you have made with lighter colors and really adjust things at any moment in the painting. It feels so much more like sculpting to me than it does painting or drawing, because with a sculpture you can adjust things throughout the entire process for the most part, and that is what gouache feels like to me, and I really like it. It's fun to be able to feel like you're really engaged with your craft. It's very hard to explain, but I hope you guys are sort of getting the gist of what I mean. The color selection for the skull was mostly based off of my visual reference, but I exaggerated the colors a little bit. In the image, the shadows are definitely very cool, almost blue, but I just decided to exaggerate those colors a bit because that is what I enjoy in other people's art, so I thought I would give it a whirl. And then I debated whether or not I wanted to keep the entire thing gouache and do line art in gouache, but I decided I wanted to give it a little bit more of a mixed media feel because that's another thing that I admire in a lot of other people's artwork. And so I took a colored pencil and added some shading as well as the line work with that. And I really like the way this turned out because it's a very gentle way of adding line art. It doesn't feel too harsh, but it's also really controlled like it would be if you inked it, rather than doing the line work with gouache, which could potentially get very messy, and I am not skilled enough to have enough control that I think I probably would have botched it if I had tried to do it that way. Here I am adding just a little bit more purple into the darkest parts of the shadows. And then I felt like the page was too blank, so I decided I wanted to do some kind of floral decoration behind it. This is where the painting starts to take a turn for the worst, I think. Not everything is a win, but I really wanted to have some kind of floral motif in the background, and I wanted to keep up the sort of mixed media feel of it, so I decided to do the whole background in colored pencil, and that is probably the part that I regret the most. I also kept going back and forth between whether or not I wanted it to just be an outline or colored in, and it was just a big ol' mess. Those yellow flowers are like the ugliest things I've ever seen. I do kind of salvage them a little by going over them with the yellow colored pencil again, but overall, I think what I should have done is do what I really wanted to do from the beginning and done it all in ink. The only reason I didn't do it all in ink was because I was afraid that was too much in my comfort zone, but I really liked the way the skull turned out, and now I really hate the way the background turned out, so I really should have just gone with what is comfortable. It's a good lesson to learn that sometimes you should just stick to what you know. You don't always have to be testing yourself and experimenting. I think with enough tweaking, I do end up making the background look okay. As far as the finished product goes, I am mostly disappointed with how much the skull kind of sinks into the background. I was hoping that the different textures would be enough to keep the skull popping off the page, but unfortunately the color palettes are too similar, which I did do on purpose, but didn't really think about the fact that the skull would just kind of get absorbed into the background. I have been playing with the idea of, going in after the fact and putting some darker line work around the skull to help bring it off the page, but I'm worried that I'm just gonna mess it up even more. So instead, I'm just going to allow this one to be what it is, an experiment and a slight failure, but something to learn from in the future and not mess with it, because I think I have done enough damage to this one already. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.